the antidote, the medicine for so much of what ails men is having brothers that they trust, that they really, really trust. And that, unfortunately, for past generations has been a bit of an epidemic.
Welcome to the Well Worshipped Man podcast, where men come to build unshakable presence, become the rock in their relationship, and build a legacy that lasts beyond their years. Here, we explore the path to mature masculinity through humble power, daily devotion, and unwavering integrity.
Thanks, baby. Today on the show, we have Chris Marhefka. Chris is a transformational coach for high-driving entrepreneurs focusing on health, wealth, and relationships. He is the co-founder of the worldwide men's movement, 13 Pines, and an experienced entrepreneur, having grown and exited 3, 6, and 7-figure companies in health and personal development. Chris utilizes thousands of hours of experience in emotional healing, trauma facilitation, somatics, breath work, masculine embodiment, relationship and communication coaching, men's development, business entrepreneurship, and leadership mentoring. He has worked with over 2,000 clients in physical, mental, emotional, energetic, and spiritual development. Chris has devoted his life to service, God, and his family. Welcome, Chris.
Thank you so much for having me on.
Yeah. We were just chatting a little bit before getting started, and you were sharing that you've just started a season of living in the colder months down in Mexico with your family. One of the reasons why is the connection to nature, and that's been a theme of the work across your careers, nature and wilderness. And so talk to us about maybe that initial call to the wild.
Hmm. Yeah, there's an old saying that says I'm actually not even sure where it comes from, but it says if you want to heal your body, go to the sea. If you want to heal your mind, go to the mountains. If you want to heal your soul, go to the desert. And I'm fortunate enough to have experience in all those different environments. And I would say with certainty that they're all true. um, Man, the first and the deepest call is, I think, just as a man, there's a call to adventure and there's a call to wild in every man. And unfortunately for most, it gets civilized out of him early enough before he can actually experience it. And fortunately for me, I had the experience when I was a young boy. I was living in Virginia, and I was running through the forest barefoot, handling snakes, building tree houses, and playing in the dirt. And I didn't know how much that actually impacted me until later in life when I started doing this work and I started supporting others and I started bringing people out into the wilderness, like how impactful it can really be. And so fortunately, I didn't fully get civilized out of that call and out of that yearning. And I just believe deep within me that we are a product of nature. Like we are a product of this earth. And I've spent well over a decade in the health and wellness space. So I can say with certainty that the closer we are to nature, the healthier, the happier, the more fulfilled we actually become. And that's in a large part to why we decide to spend our winter season for 4, 5, 6 months down here in Mexico. And on the surface, it seems like a crazy decision. We can afford to live anywhere in the States. We can afford to have air condition and all the amenities. But the truth is that when we're down here and we don't have a lot of those luxuries, we wake before the sun, we go to sleep, we watch every sunset together, and my body never feels better. I feel more connected than ever. And I tell all my friends, my entrepreneur friends, is my level of creativity starts churning on a whole new level. And I really credit that to just the way of life and the cadence at which we live. It's really just Earth's cadence, which is so much slower than we live when we're in the States, for instance, or in a city. And so it's definitely a season I look forward to because in a way, it resets me. It resets my nervous system. It resets my clarity. And it almost sets up everything I do when I quote unquote step back into the world. Because in a way, I feel somewhat like disconnected from a lot of like the hustle and bustle of like what I would normally be involved in living somewhere like in Austin, which is where we spend a lot of our other time. And so in some ways it feels a little disconnecting. But when I return to it completely reset. And so that's why I love being here, and you're catching me at a time where we just got here about a week ago. So I'm like, just the plane is landing and it's just slowly easing down the taxiway. And, I'm sure we'll talk more about, the impact of nature, but I'll leave it at that.
I'm curious if it feels more challenging to go from one way to the other. Like you're mentioning, when you're landing in Mexico, it's like, oh, there's a little bit of this removal of yourself from Austin and things that you're going to maybe miss out on or whatever. And then I imagine that tapers out and you really love, obviously you're spending 5 or 6 months there, you really love the process of being there. And then going back to Austin, I'm wondering if you have a similar thing, because what it seems like is humans have a lot of inertia, like wherever we
Mhm.
are, we like to be, and it's hard to change that process. And so when people aren't spending a lot of time in nature, it can be challenging to get them there. And I guess two-part question, I'm wondering for
Yeah.
you, is it easier to go from one to the other, or is it
Mhm.
always a challenge to like switch where you are
Mhm.
to where you're going? And then um how do we support that process of getting people
Mhm.
from their cities into nature so you can have this reset that you're talking about?
Yeah. Phenomenal question. The answer is very clear for me. Settling in to the cadence and the pace of nature feels so much more natural to me going that direction. And I can feel always for like the first few days of getting here or going on retreat into the forest, I'm like bringing with me a little bit of that like buzz, that like energetic static, but very quickly it dissipates. You can literally just watch a tree for 10 minutes and it'll dissipate. Going the other way, I notice my my level of awareness is so much greater to the impact that it has on me. And I told this story to some friends last year. I really noticed it. We were driving back, and it's a long drive from where we are in Austin to down where we live on the Pacific coast. And it's over 20 hours. And we stop along the way. It's a lovely drive. And for like 22 of the 24 hours, say, completely relaxed, at ease, like driving on the highway, no care in the world, body's fully relaxed. And then I hit the San Antonio traffic. And then I feel the body start to tighten. My jaw starts to tighten. And then we go a little further and I hit the Austin traffic. And I can just feel my knuckles gripping the steering wheel just a little bit more. And so, and I'm hyper aware of it because I've been living for months not in that. And so what surprises me though is even someone that I I would say I'm committed to my practice. I'm committed to my self-awareness, how quickly I slide into that vibration and I go right into like what I'd call like the city vibration. And some of the things that I notice when I first make the transition back is that I really have trouble sleeping. I have like a little bit of like a what I would call like a low level anxiety, just kind of like a jitters about things. And then funny enough, it kind of gets to the point to where I'm normalizing it and I have to be very intentional, which is what I'm going to get to next. Very intentional to stay tethered to this more natural rhythm. And so that'll get into the follow-up question, which the first thing I'll say is it takes a lot less than people think. And what I mean by that is if you're a busy man and you're on the go and you're living in a fast-paced environment, simply just getting outside, getting some sun on your skin, getting your feet in the grass for 5-10 minutes between a meeting and just breathing will move the needle more than people think. So I'm a huge fan of getting in water. We have this beautiful place called Barton Springs in Austin, Texas. So when I'm there, it's like an anchor point for me because I can just go there for even just an hour. I can kind of stop in between, drop in the water. It's 72 degrees year round and I feel my body relax, and it has that same influence of like resetting my clarity, resetting my center. And a lot of people don't live in places where green space is accessible right out their front door. But I would guess that most people have it within 30 minutes. And so even if it's just taking a few hours on a weekend to have a reset. And one thing I notice too is that, and we may or may not dive into this, but the most quality time I have with my daughter is in nature. And I think that's a combination of I'm just slowing down, I'm more present. But one thing I notice happens is that her sense of awe and amazement with the world goes up to another level. And this is a really interesting thing to watch in my daughter's almost 2, that she's not as amazed by like a cabinet or a table or a plate as she is as a leaf or a cricket or a stick. And I find that fascinating, and I think is something that's clearly deeply embedded in our biology, because I didn't teach her that. We didn't teach her to be more excited about nature than artificial. So yeah, I would say that doing your best to have like micro resets in your life where you're in direct contact with the earth, whether that's in the earth, the sun on your skin, the wind in your face, whatever it is, jumping in water, can do wonders. And I don't say that lightly. It can really do wonders for men, especially if you're living in a faster paced lifestyle.
Yeah, what you shared about less being required to move the needle than what most people believe is huge. Because, as men, we can be very black or white. I need to ground my feet in the grass for an hour, or it doesn't matter at all.
Hmm.
But like you say, 5 or 10 minutes can make a real difference, especially in a world where, for a lot of us, unfortunately, what is natural has become abnormal and what's artificial has become normal. We live in kind of this soup of Wi-Fi and toxic air and toxic water and all of these things. So being able to remove ourselves and have a micro reset and return to what's natural, as your daughter's exuberance and interest in a leaf shows, it's like those are really our roots. And the more that we act outside of what's true for us, which is our connection to the mother, to earth, the more dis-ease that we'll experience, whether that's the low grade anxiety that you experience or what guys think is low grade anxiety that it's actually high grade, but it's sufficiently suppressed
Yeah.
that it feels that way. And so you talked about this micro reset. I know that you do some work with men and yourself with more macro resets of actually being able to immerse themselves in nature and develop a relationship that shifts things or that helps them return to something that feels more true. So talk to us about those longer initiatory experiences that you've had in nature on your own or that you've led for other men.
Yeah. Yeah. I'll start with my own personal experience. I was living that classic fast paced, maximum stress lifestyle for just about a decade, an entrepreneurial decade of just going harder than, really priding myself on going harder than anyone and working really working my life away, my life force, all of my relationships. And it nearly killed me in a lot of ways. And the first thing that is like my first personal development that I did was I started backpacking, and I would go out into the woods, or I'd go out on a trail. Back then I was chipping away at the Appalachian Trail, and I was doing sections of that on weekends. And sometimes I would meet up with some buddies, one, two guys, and we would do a little bit. And sometimes I was solo. And what I found is, even before I had words for it, is that I would start to self-reflect. I would self-reflect on the week before, on the month before. I would think much more deeply about the future. I would think more about my actions and the words I had chosen and how I was choosing to live my life. And so even though, I mean, I was this very stubborn guy and I didn't really change my ways for a while until it really slapped me in the face, but I noticed that it would have at least a short-term impact, even just like a weekend trip or a couple of days out into the woods. I would come back and I would be a better man. I would be a more patient man. I'd be a more understanding man for at least a couple weeks after that. And so even before I was really professionally into this work, I was actually running my own businesses and I was in health and wellness. I started seeing client after client have problems and challenges that were much deeper than the conversations that we were having, like in coaching and consulting and in the gym and things like that. And so I had this crazy idea, and I just invited first just members of my gym. I owned a gym, and I think it was about 12 or 14 of us, and myself and one of my staff, we took them out into the woods. It was the Ocala National Forest, which was about an hour from where we were. And I had no skills, no framework. I hadn't been trained in anything, but I just had this trust from my own personal experience. And I had been going out in the woods myself for a couple of years at that point. So I felt confident. And it wasn't like we were in deep backcountry. We drove in and we had a little camp and we all had tents, and it wasn't rugged by any means. But all we did is we did some journaling. I had a couple of reflection questions, and we had designated silence time where we would just go out individually, and I would just say, just go find a spot and we're just going to sit for the next hour, and then we'll come back and we'll reconvene and we'll talk about it. And I didn't know what was going to come up. I didn't know what they would share, but just time and time again, like the shares were just so emotional, so liberating. People feeling like a deeper connection to what I now call God. I didn't call God back then, but just something more than, for a lot of them, years of structured religion or church or whatever it may be. They're like, I've never felt like this, like oneness, whatever word you want to put to it. And that's actually when inside of me, I started to shift of like how I wanted to serve others. Because up until that point, it seemed very surface. It was a lot of just fitness and nutrition and business and leadership. And I got this hint that there was so much more. And I was like, if this little thing with literally no planning and no structure can have this much of an impact for people, there's got to be more. And that was really just like a spark that continued on my own personal development journey. And the thing that's always been threaded through has been some aspect of nature. And now with 13 Pines, we have, I was describing, we have kind of two styles of retreats. We have one where we're mostly indoors on meditation cushions and we're doing like really deep practices and amazing retreats. And then the other one is where we're just completely off grid in the wild. And very different styles, both very beneficial. And the one that's very alive for me in bringing more of is these wilderness experiences and these rites of passage. The word that you use is actually the same words that I use as well, is that it is an initiation. It's an initiatory experience, and one that unfortunately has been largely lost in our cultures. And so I have visions for more and more challenging, because I've been through some pretty challenging initiations myself, and my partners always battle with the liability and what people are ready for. And truthfully, like, I think there's a lot of magic for men in meeting an edge that's way further than they thought, and facing it and ultimately expanding past it. This last one that I ran in Sedona about a month ago was super unique. We did a bunch of canyoning and rappelling, which for those that don't know is like you have a rope and you're kind of like leaning over the edge of like a couple 100 feet of a cliff, and then you just lean back and you have these carabiners and these mechanical devices. We had a professional guide. It wasn't me doing it, but and you're just free falling for hundreds of feet. And it was wild what that brought up in men. And then to see the evolution as the trip went on, because we did a couple days of that, of just the confidence that was built. And then the reflections around the fire at night of how this occurs with their relationship, or how this occurs with their work in the world, and that they feel liberated because they literally face death in a way. Like, it's not likely, but a rope could break, a carabiner could go wrong. And so there's like a level of danger that I think is actually incredibly valuable for men to face. And really is the foundation of any true rite of passage, is some level of like skirting the line of physical danger. So, yeah, that's a world that I like playing in, and I'm definitely going to be doing more of going forward.
And you were talking about these two different types of retreats that you all do. I was thinking, even just before that, it sounds like what you're describing as part of the benefit of being in nature is this silence, this space to like be reflective because there's nothing else that's happening. And, um, you can sit in silence inside your own house if you want. And then you shared that you're doing these two different types of experiences and offering both. And just like you said, both have their benefits and their practices to them. But when you're describing these more initiatory paths, you're mentioning, well, one of the big benefits of this is facing this potential quote unquote death. It
Yeah.
might feel like it in your body, which is what matters, and then coming to the other side. And I'm wondering if there are other stark differences that you see between the two, because it's good to have different tools in our toolbox, and to know that we can, yes, sit inside in silence, and that's going to create really powerful, growth for us in a lot of ways. But when might one be the tool that you would want to use, and what are the biggest differences that you see in the men that come out of, one experience versus the other?
Yeah, great question. I've really never thought about it. The first thing that comes to mind is the level of control we have of the environment. So if we're seeking to do work which needs a specific environment, it really helps to have some control over it. Like, okay, we got music and we have a roof over our head and we got walls and we want to do this specific thing. And so if you want to completely lose control, you go out into the wild because anything can happen. And we weren't sure if we were going to get this monsoon rainstorm, which is highly unlikely to that area at that time. But the week prior, they had like more rain than they'd ever had. And fortunately, it stopped like the day before we got there. But the show goes on. And in a lot of ways, the lack of control is oftentimes the gift for a lot of men in their leadership is like, okay, how do I deal with the chaos? Like when it doesn't go my way, it's like Mike Tyson says, everyone is a plan until they get punched in the face. And that's honestly what the wild can do is it'll punch you in the face and you learn to embrace it and dance with it and surf it. And so I think that's one aspect, the control level that one can be a benefit in one way and one a benefit in the other. Now, the level of, should I say, we can facilitate a level of connection with another person through guided practices in the more indoor controlled environment. We can do that type of work better and deeper in that space.
Mm-hmm.
The level and the depth of connection to God, earth, universe around us, everything, I believe is facilitated better outside. And so those are two slightly different things. The benefits that guys get from like our traditional men's work feels like a lot of benefits that are very tangible to the real world, to the relationships they have, the work that they do in the world. Whereas some of the things that happen to men feel a little bit more like etheric and theoretical, and they take time to set in. Like it's not as like clear like how I'm going to implement this when I get home. Like I know a change has happened and I feel it, but it's not as like concrete as some of the like the exercises and the work we do in the other one, if that makes sense.
Yeah, as you're talking, I'm seeing this, the way that it would be stated in some lineages would be like the right hand path to spirit versus the left hand path to spirit. And it's like, okay, when there's a lot of control and structure and stability, like in these indoor environments, then you just can predict a little bit better like what's going to happen, and the practices that you're doing are more in this masculine container kind of, and what's happening in that masculine container, because it's the containment that's masculine, is the experience is more of these like, you tend to be bringing up more of the feminine heart of the men in those spaces. It's like it has to feel like the structure is held so that I can sit with my own shadow, so that I can tell this man in front of me what my shame is and all of these things. And then in this like left-handed outdoor path, you're having more of this experiential embodiment thing, which in a feminine process, you can't really describe it in words. It is about the feeling, and the container is Mother Earth. Like the container is the feminine, and they're learning more of this like, oh, this is like what it feels like to be to quote unquote be a man. This is what it feels like to access these masculine strengths. So it's interesting to hear. I wouldn't have thought about it either until you're just speaking about it. So it's really beautiful that you have both of those options, because it's like we need to learn the skills. We need to learn how to communicate well and what we're feeling and how to sit in stillness. There's not really quite enough stillness. And then also, if all I know are the facts of how to do these things, but I don't have the experiential process of how do I respond when I feel at risk of death, then it won't really quite cross over. So it's really beautiful
Mhm.
that you have both of these spaces.
Thank you. I
Yeah.
love that reflection, and spot on, by the way. Like, you described that so well. Thank you.
Yeah. And I see in both those spaces are initiatory
Mhm.
spaces. In both those spaces, there is exposure to risk and danger, be it physical danger, emotional danger, stepping forward, letting yourself be seen. And in the presence of risk with men, there's this subtraction that happens, and we can really get to the heart of the matter. The armor, the masks are subtracted, and we're able to see into the heart of a man at his most vulnerable, right? There's no control on the edge where you are not operating within the domain of which you have experience in. And a lot of men can feel really insecure there. They can feel really weak there and powerless there. And at the same time, there's so much power in going there. So when you're with these men who have stripped off their armor, who are feeling bare, like their fragile heart is out in the open, how do you communicate to these guys that that's also a seat of power and that they also are a man in that place?
Mm. Yeah. Honestly, it just starts with looking him in the eyes and just a nod of acknowledgement. Like, yeah, brother. And I think that sense of acceptance, the okayness of like him being in that process and him being in that messiness and this vulnerable, scary state is not only okay, but it's completely welcome here. And like with that level of like welcoming is what blossoms that little seed inside of him. I think that in those spaces, the best and really one of the only things that we do is bring complete safety and acceptance to whatever that experience is. And like, that's the healing moment that like comes alive in him, and he becomes his own transformation when he just has the space and the acceptance of it. He's like, oh, I'm not judged for that. Like, oh, you don't think I'm an idiot or like what weak or whatever. Like, oh wow. Like, and there's just this liberation that happens simply by creating the container for it, and and sometimes lovingly coaxing it forward, like, yeah, and more, brother, like, and more, yeah, like more. Yeah.
Yeah. It's that experience of being courageous enough to step into the perceived danger. And what was a perceived pit of snakes in the right space is a feather bed. You thought it was going to be so dangerous here. You thought you were going to be annihilated. And actually, it's so safe. Actually, there's more love here. Actually, we see you more deeply.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's the place that we feel like men come alive. It's more joy, it's more love, it's more connection, it's just more light. Like they're just like, this is it. Like this is like the thing that I feared the most was actually the doorway, like you're saying, to actually what I was looking for and I didn't know how to put words to.
We are talking a little bit about how men are relating to themselves differently in these processes. But, you just said the words like, hey, brother, like, we're here, and I've spoken to men before where like they start doing this work and it's like, even those words are like, eye roll. Like, why are you even saying that, And in women's work world, we talk about the sisterhood wound all the time. There's just this like lack of trust in other women because of, all of these different dimensions. But I don't even know if I've ever heard the term of a brother wound. And I'm wondering if in these different experiences or other experiences you've had, like, are men more likely to relate to each other in certain settings better? Because what I'm seeing is maybe like, okay, they feel connected to each other quicker when we're like outside doing nature hiking things, but maybe they leave feeling more connected after doing some of the heart sharing work, or maybe it's just different types of connection. Um, and have you had men come in that just are like not really trustworthy of other men at all?
Great question. The first thing I would say is that you haven't heard it because women are far more in touch and articulate and expressive, and they've nailed it. But the brother wound definitely exists, and we do one of the exercises we'll do in some of our retreats is like a step in the circle exercise, like step in the circle if you've ever experienced this. And one of the things that we'll say is step in the circle if you have not trusted other men in the past or you don't trust men. And almost unanimously, men will step in the circle. And what I notice though is that even though that's the barrier, not the barrier, but that's like the level at which a lot of guys start, which I think in a way is why men are so reluctant to get into like men's work. They just are. Like, I know they are. They're so reluctant. And it's because of that lack of trust. And that they're like, what? Like, what does he have? Like, what? No, I don't trust. And they haven't really experienced that trust. And I don't blame them. Like, most men didn't get that. And so that's like our starting point, is this lack of trust. But by the time they realize, and it can be quick, it can be like on the first few hours, the first hour of a retreat, like once they realize like, oh wow, this is not that. In fact, it's the opposite. Men open up and their hearts come alive and they blossom, and it's so beautiful. And even the thickest resistance cannot resist a room full of 40, 50 men dropping into their hearts. Because we've had the strongest of resistance coming in and like, I'm only here because my woman told me I had to be here. And like, you're like, this is a culture. You guys don't know whatever. Those guys sometimes are the most beautiful heart-opening transformations, because there's been so much energy that they've committed their life to resisting this like heart-centered path. And then when they find that it's actually okay to be there, like that energy just like explodes through their heart. And some of like the toughest exterior guys end up being like the most warm, deeply expressive, like loving guys. I'm thinking of a guy on just like one of these last retreats, and the first thing he said on opening circle was, I never cry. I'm not going to cry here. The last thing he said as we were closing, bawling, this is the greatest experience of my life. I'm just forever grateful. And it was just, and the whole room was cracked wide open. And it's just a testament to like almost every guy has never had a space like that. And when they experience it, it's medicine. And so, yeah, that wound absolutely exists. We may not speak about it as eloquently or even have awareness to it, but it's very present for so many men. And yeah, the antidote, the medicine for so much of what ails men is having brothers that they trust, that they really, really trust. and that, unfortunately, for past generations has been a bit of an epidemic. They haven't necessarily had that, and so they've gone two paths. They've either let all of the tension and the stress that they can't release with their brothers, and they let it seep out in really unhealthy ways into the women in their lives and their children, and abuse and all the harm we hear about in the world. And the other quieter path is that they turn it on themselves. Mm-hmm. And that pressure causes disease and death. And that, I believe, is a strong root of why men die much faster and oftentimes live a much more miserable later years than the women in our culture, is because they're turning all of that energy and that tension inward that they have no outlet for otherwise.
There are far too few spaces for men to feel the entirety of their rage and their grief. I was just at an event last night, and in the world of men's work, it was a pretty gentle event. But one man, the facilitator, is, what's present in the room? And this guy was like, fear, probably. And the facilitator was like, no, probably. Like, what are you feeling? And he's like, I feel afraid. And he's like, I've never said that before. The facilitator is like, how does that feel? I think it feels liberating. The facilitator is like, how powerful was it for you men to hear this guy admit that he feels afraid, right? This guy had never in his life said the words, I feel afraid. And at this really simple event, there was an opening that allowed him to go there. And you could see the difference, him walking into that event and him walking out of the event. Wow, it's like, what a basic need that's gone unfulfilled that we can start to meet.
I was just going to say, which this also lends to it. So, but you said the answer to a lot of men's problems is having brothers. And as soon as you said that, I was thinking the answer to a lot of women's problems is men having brothers. And as you're talking, it's like, oh, this man's never admitted ever before that he feels afraid. It's like, that's the load in partnerships when men don't have brothers or this internal work that the women are carrying. It's like, I can feel your fear. I can feel your guilt.
Yeah,
I
she
can
knows.
feel your shame. I can feel your anger. And the pretending or the lack of awareness or the lack of words or tools to be able to share that and describe that so that we can manage the household and the love and the connection together is all on the women. Like, it's not like if you're not admitting it, it's not there. If it's there, the woman's feeling it, whether she's aware of it or not, whoever she is, we don't know her tools, but like the emotional weight, just like the physical weight is usually on the male primarily, the emotional weight is usually on the female. And so if there aren't these circles, exactly what you're saying, like that is coming out at women in some fashion, and there are certainly like egregious ways that it's coming out, but it can also just be in like the very slow deterioration of her well-being. And I think it's a really important thing to highlight. Like, these men's circles and these men's initiations are the answer to the problems of the men and ours as well.
Yeah, thank you for saying that. It's absolutely true. And we get about as many, if not more, messages from the feminine partners after men come back from retreats. That's probably more than the men. and yeah, you're absolutely right. And the word that comes to me is like their honesty. Like, a lot of men didn't have the tools or the access path to like get to that deep honesty within themselves, and like you were saying, Isaac, like had never spoken it before and probably never felt safe. And so like the way I think about like men's work is it's like the trial ground, it's the dojo, it's where we get to practice things and like do the new movements and like, how did that go? Okay, now you bring it into your life, now you bring it to your woman, like boom, you got it. And it's still going to be tough when you bring it to your woman, but like way better after repping it with you guys.
Yeah. Yeah.
That just, like, really hit my heart, like, it's so sweet to have this visual of all of you guys just, like, practicing these skills and then, like, bringing them back to us, and it's like, "Oh, you're doing so good."
Yeah. You gotta get the reps in, and even with the reps, when you step onto the court for game time, your knees are probably gonna be wobbly, but if you've done the
Oh,
reps, you're gonna get through it, and you'll have some notes on the back end to be able to improve. And to any of the guys listening that are expending a lot of energy trying to hide your dissatisfaction, your frustration, whatever it is from your feminine partner, she knows
uh-huh.
the effort that you're putting is futile. It's wasted. She knows, and it's up to you to bring it up and address it. She wants to feel your heart. She doesn't want to feel your armor. She doesn't want to feel how perfect you are, how much you have it together, right? That's important to create security and safety, but she also wants to feel your heart. And if you've been skewing to one direction of all armor, have together all the time, probably what she's most desiring is to see you let it fall apart just a little bit with some skills, right? Maybe you've practiced with the men what it looks like to fall apart and then bringing it to her without dumping it at her feet, but letting her into your internal world. That's probably what she's wanting the most from you.
Mhm. Mhm.
So,
We're going to switch gears a little here. We've been talking about initiations, and you, within the past couple of years, went through a different kind of initiation, which was the birth of your daughter. So just tell
mm,
us what that journey has been like becoming a father.
hmm. Piggybacking off of the theme we were just talking about, it's like all the training and all the practice in men's work and in these safe spaces. So grateful that A, I went through it, and B, it was like graduate level, doctorate level. When my daughter came into this world, both in just the way it opened my heart that I didn't even think was possible, and B, in what it brought out in me, the level of leadership, providership, the level of support and understanding, the level of admiration of seeing my woman, who I already thought was strong, go through birth, 38 hours in her case. It forever shifted just how I viewed her and how I viewed the feminine as a whole. And there was no initiation I had done prior that opened up those realms in me that becoming a father did. And I was a guy who, like I said briefly earlier, I committed my life to material success until I was about 32, 33 years old. And I started to see the world a different way. But I wasn't sure if I was ever going to have kids. In fact, I don't think I wanted to back then. And it really wasn't until I met my wife that I was certain I wanted that life path, but I had no idea both the challenge and the gifts. Like it's really hard to put into words just like the level of everyday joy and love and connection that is possible. And I don't, I am very careful not to project my ideals and my life path onto others. But one of the things that have said I'm committed to, at least in the work that I do in the world, is to speaking about how positive an experience it has been for me in just 2 years, because all I heard was the opposite of that growing up. And I had a loving upbringing, I had loving parents, but like they weren't raving about how awesome it was, that's for sure. And I hadn't really heard anything but like your life is gonna end. Like that was what I heard about it for most of my life. And there are some things about my life that aren't the same. Absolutely. And some of those things that came in are far greater and far better than I could ever imagine. And I didn't really hear too many people talking about that. Now, as I got later in my development and I surrounded myself with more conscious men, I was hearing those stories, but it definitely wasn't something I heard openly too much. So I'm open to sharing more about the challenges and the positive benefits as well. But it's an initiation that I think for both men, and I know it's an initiation for women as well. I'm experiencing it secondhand, what my wife has gone through and continues to, in her stepping into her full mothership and me stepping in my full fathership.
I have heard this experience before where men were not like didn't really care if they had kids, kind of. Even if they were like suspecting that life path, were kind of just like meh, whatever. And then they meet someone they actually think they're meant to be with. Some maybe ended up with this person, some maybe not, but like I feel like this is an important part of a lot of men's stories because a lot of information exists about like a woman's knowing about life in general, whatever it is. And I think that there's something to be said about the man's knowing. Like there is something that appears to happen also in the man's body when he's in the presence of a woman that he could see being the mother of his kids, that shifts his perception of his own ability to be a father or his own desire to be a father, that seems to not be just your experience. And I imagine maybe it was part of where you were in your life, but also because of, meeting your wife. And now because of this experience that you're describing, it can't really be deemed as anything other than like a knowing, like, oh, your body was telling you, like, yes, go this way. Yes,
Yeah.
go this way. So I think that's really important to highlight. And just thank you for sharing that. I'm wondering if you currently have a daughter. So if raising her has shifted your understanding of the feminine in general, and then also maybe what she's been mirroring to you, if anything, yet at this age about your own edges.
Hmm. Yes. Yes. um, First off, thank you for highlighting that piece about the man's knowing. That's another thing I'm really committed to speaking on, is like this clarity that a man can actually get to of choosing in his life. And like the scenario you described was exactly me. It's like, I guess I would have had kids if my previous partner wanted it and it was just the next life step. That's kind of like, I guess, and I'll do it and I'll probably be a decent father. But like, it wasn't full choosing, because that it wasn't even a spark for me. It was like my whole body lit up with the knowing. And I think a part of it is like, in a little bit of like the defense of that for men is like, without that knowing, you can't really commit. Like, you can kind of say you're committing, but you're not fully there. And for men, it's almost like they want just a little bit of eject button to get out. And like, once you cross that path of like children, it's like that makes the eject button a lot more uncomfortable, a lot harder. And so I think in a lot of ways, it's like they're protecting themselves because they're not fully committed to this woman, their partner that they're with. And I think that's the big thing that changes. Like, I threw my eject button out and I said, like, no, like, this is that was a process in itself, is like really learning in my body and my actions what real full commitment is. And that was when it opened up in me. It was like, okay, well, I'm fully here. And like, she's one, I want to bring children into the world with her. And that, when it was a full yes, it was, hey, it just happened instantly because we were both a full yes to it. And yeah, so I think that's so important for men, is like, all that resistance that we oftentimes feel from them is because they're not fully clear. They're not fully certain. And they're kind of dragging their feet on so many decisions in life, because no man is going to fully commit to something he's not a full yes to. And so I think a big part of our work is helping men get to and regularly access that place in them that is their truth, that is their full clarity, that is their full yes, so that they can stop dragging their feet on life and they can jump fully into it, to like 2 feet forward, like dive into life, like belly flop into life, like really go at it. And I was finally ready for that. And now moving on to the personal side.
I just want to say one thing before you go to the personal side is this is such an important piece, I think, also for women to hear, because there is this rhetoric in, I don't really know what to call it, like pop culture, women's media of like, if he wanted to, he would kind of energy, and to stop giving space to men who aren't fully choosing you. But it's really, it's not quite worded in this way. It's coming from women's mouth of frustration at men for not doing the thing. And I think hearing from your experience, like, no, it actually is like men will actually have a full body yes, just like you will. And it's okay for you to acknowledge that he's not having a full body yes about you. That means that he could have it about someone else. Like, let him, and it doesn't have to mean, oh, he's just not showing up for me, so F him. Like, actually, he just gets to have that experience. And I don't know that I've ever really, like, there's the saying of when you know, but that doesn't really mean anything to anyone except for the people who know, you know?
Yeah.
So hearing it described in this way of like, no, it wasn't just a spark, my whole body lit up. It's like, yeah, I want my man to have that experience about me too, you know? So I think that that's a gift that the women who listen to this podcast also get to hear.
And I want to add here too, there's, yes, the right woman, and there's also the right time. There's a stage in a man's maturation that he must be at to experience that full body yes. And speaking from my inexperience, I'm not a father yet, is a part of that is his internal sense of safety within himself. One of his biggest roles bringing a child into the world is to protect, create safety for that child. And if he can't experience that within himself first, whatever that means, or be able to contact that place within himself, it's unlikely, dare I say, impossible that he's going to be able to experience a full body yes to bring a child into the world.
Yeah, thank you for saying that. I was going to add something very similar to that, and that's like, because I'm the biggest fan. I'm such a fan of men, and it's like, just because they're a no today doesn't mean that they're going to be a no tomorrow or a year from now, or like you said, when they hit this stage of development, this cycle where they can access it and the parts of their life align. This is, I'm a huge fan of Alison Armstrong's work, and she talks a lot about the stages in the development of men. And it's like, there's a huge difference in dating a man in the knight stage versus the prince stage versus a king. And so really understanding that, and this is kind of more for the women, is like understanding that in a man will give you so much relief in like what you're dealing with. And for men, they can't be forced through these stages. They just can't. They can't be told that they need to be something that they're not. We all kind of go through, we go through these developments, these stages as we are meant to. And I think things like the work we do in the world, and guys listening to this podcast, is it helps to accelerate that. It helps to accelerate a little bit of the understanding, a little bit of the awareness. And even with that, though, guys that do all the work, there's just a natural progression that a man goes through in his life. And there's a readiness that comes alive as he walks through those stages that you just can't push him through. You can't tell a man he's ready. I know we kind of shifted to talking to the women, but yeah.
What's the book that you just read?
The Amazing Development of Men is the Alison Armstrong book that I've read that talks about these stages, Prince, Knight, King.
So it's interesting you're bringing this up because he was just listening to it. And when we were talking about it, it's like our conversation was, okay, it's helpful for everyone involved to know that these stages exist. And then, the men doing the work to not have failure to launch, to actually progress through the stages. But then if I know that as someone who is dating a man, then I get to decide, okay, like, am I in the phase where I want to be dating a knight? Like, do I want to
Mhm.
see the beauty of his opening through all of these phases? Okay, great. I don't have to rush the process. But if I don't want to be treated the way that a knight has like access to in that phase, then I'm just not meant to be dating a knight right now, and I have
Yeah,
to give that up.
absolutely. Yeah. It's one of the books I recommend everyone involved to read, men and women. It gives a lot of understanding to such a simple process, actually. That's what I've said for a long time, especially when I used to do more work with women, is like, men are actually quite simple, but you're trying to understand them through your lens, and they have a very different lens. And once you get it, it's like, oh, wow. Like, okay, I can either be with that, deal with that, like accept that or not. That's it.
Yeah, so circling back to our parenting question.
Mm-hmm.
I think what I asked was, just the things that have come alive for you and being mirrored by your
Mm-hmm.
daughter. But yeah, anything that feels alive that you'd like to share about parenting, I would also just like to hear it, your
Yeah.
reflections.
There's so many lessons. I'm like, where to start? So the first thing, this feels like the most embodied lesson that I've continued to learn is, and I think you referenced this earlier, Isaac, the pattern of like holding it all together or like pretending. I think you both mentioned actually, like the pretending I'm good when I'm not good. What I noticed from day one, of holding her or or like putting her to sleep was whatever my internal state was the exact reflection she was giving me. So if she was upset, she's not upset. She doesn't have any reference point besides what she's feeling from me. And if it's not like she's hungry or like, then it's me. And so I noticed very quickly the part of me that like wanted to have it together or wanted to control the situation. And I remember really vividly, I think it was in the first week, she was just so upset. Like the picture of like what an upset, unconsolable baby is. And I'm outside, and this is actually funny enough. I can weave in nature here, because this became our habit later. But I'll tell this story first. I was outside on our patio on our back deck, and it was like 3 o'clock in the morning, and so my wife needed a rest, and I was out there just at night in the stars, and I was rocking her, and for a long time, and I had this awareness. I was like, oh, I've been trying to get her to shut up. I've been trying to get her to go to sleep. I'm trying to force my will on her. And then as soon as I dropped into practice, I just started breathing. I stopped rocking her. I stopped pacing. I just dropped into my breath, and I just like limb by limb, muscle by muscle, I just started relaxing like one at a time, and just my energy dropped. I felt like my feet back on the ground, and I could just feel her body, muscle by muscle, relax more and more until it was if she drifted off into sleep. She drifted off into complete relaxation, which became sleep. And it happened within maybe 5 to 10 minutes of me realizing what was happening and just dropping into practice. And I realized there's still that part of me, like even with all the training, even with all the awareness, is like I still have this, like I want to control it to be the way that's easier for me. And she just showed me like how it's like, no, like just give me your presence and just give me your safety. And time again, for like, she kept training me in that for like at least the first 6 months till I finally got the lesson in me. Cause there's times after that where I just forget. You wake up in the middle of the night and I'm like, get back to sleep. And I'm like, oh yeah. Okay. It didn't take me 3 hours to realize it this time. Okay. I got it in 10 minutes. Like, okay, great. And just, yeah, for at least the first 6 months of life, like that was my, like this glaringly obvious lesson that I was still trying to like hold this, yeah, this control, this armor, this like pretend like the world doesn't feel when I'm out of like when I'm out of my center, like when I'm out of my heart, like when I'm not really here. And she was telling me just time and time again, hey, you're not really here. You're not in your center. You're not with me. And I mean, she still does today. It's a little different because I don't get to rock her to sleep as much anymore, but um, she'll remind me of it when we're playing together or when I just drift off into a thought. She'll bring me back. That's a huge one. The other one I referenced before a little bit, but the way she has brought me like a teacher back to awe and amazement with the world. It's like when I'm really with her and when we're outside in nature, and that was the routine that I was going to allude to before. Anytime it was like, okay, I'm on deck and I gotta hold her, and I would walk outside, and we had this backyard that had a bunch of oak trees, and I would go walk around the trees, and I would just put my hand on the tree, and I could see her like looking up at it and like looking up at the leaves and the wind. And no matter what time of day, we would just go outside and be with the trees. And for both of us, it helped us calm down and just like faster and faster. It was like, okay, no problem. We'll just go outside. And like, that's what we both needed. And so as she got older and we were playing together, we would be outside. We'd go for walks every day, multiple times a day. And she would bring me back to this, like, you know, the level of just childlike play. I don't know if you guys have ever been on a mushroom ceremony, but just like the wowness of life, like just like, what? Like, oh, and without anything, she just is there. And fortunately, at this stage of life, I'm present enough to like see it and like be in it with her. And I'm like, you're right. Like, this is amazing. Like, this is amazing. And that's something that I only, even in my development journey, only really touched in like these like peak experiences in the moments where it would bring me back to it. But like, she really like brings it all the time. So yeah, that's another amazing part of it is just like the joy and the awe and just like the amazement with the world. And I think it's just like the level of trust that it deepened between me and my wife to like go through this together and to day in and day out, moment after moment, reiterate to each other that like we're in this together. Like just the foundation of our house grew that much stronger through the added stress of a child coming into our household, into our family. The way I describe it, it's like you think your foundation doesn't have cracks until it floods, and then the water expands those cracks. And so the process of that remediation of the water and like the dealing with the things that came up made our foundation stronger. And that was one thing that, I mean, we already felt solid, but like that brought it to a whole nother level.
Thank you for this. I'm like, oh, these codes that you just dropped are our listeners should be Venmoing you. The first story about, oh, oops, like I'm trying to put my will onto her. I just need to be in my practice. For those of you that don't know, the baby's and young child's nervous system is not developed. They literally cannot regulate themselves scientifically. And so, there is the old way of like cry it out method that I think is starting to shift out, which is great, but they really need us. Like she really, really needed your breath in that moment. There was no way that she was going to get regulated without you because she doesn't have the ability. And just like we are all kind of growing our capacity to manage our nervous systems all the time, it's like they don't even have the toolbox to put that tool in yet. And so, yeah, we always talk about after podcasts when we interview fathers, we're like, this is awesome. Like, we're so happy that we're getting all this information ahead of time. So thank you for that. I feel like that's so, so, so important to hear. I have the science behind it, but just like the experiential story of it. And as you're talking about the second piece of the way that she's teaching you awe, I grew up Catholic, and there is a teaching in the Bible, yeah, that's like, if only with like, you look at the world with the heart of a child, like, then you'll know the kingdom of heaven.
Mhm.
And it's like, we're so busy being stressed about what's wrong or what we are worried about in the future, and it's like, little children just walk around the world like it's a map to explore. Like it's not a race to be won. It's just a map to explore. Oh, look at this bug that God gave me to like hang out with today. That's awesome. I was on a walk this morning, or I think I just walked inside to your apartment. There were like 3 slugs on the ground. I'm like, wow, look at these slugs that came to hang out today? And it really is like that. Like if we're just looking at the world always with curiosity, we get to experience heaven all the time, and we're
Mhm.
making our own like living hell by all of these worries and all of these attachments, and you know keeping our head down in our work instead of looking up at the nature around you. So it's a really beautiful, I mean, you were already connected to nature, but the fact that she's even deepening and deepening and deepening is so sweet. And then code 3 that you offered us is that, what you're feeling in these processes of initiations as parenthood, they're meant to show you the edges of your relationship. Like, it's not, I feel like this is where a lot of uh, parenting in our parents' generation like went awry. It's like, oh, there's an issue in the household, and now it's an issue between us instead of like, oh, look at this problem that we get to solve together. Like, thank you to our child for showing us where there was a crack in our foundation. And conscious partnership kind of works in that way. Oops, like we just found a crack in our foundation. Like, let's sit down and brainstorm this together instead of blaming it on each other. Now you have this third mirror with your child to show you like where your edges are. I've been saying recently this analogy of like, you don't get stronger lifting weights that aren't heavy. You get
Mm.
stronger lifting weights that are heavy. You have to find your edge in order to strengthen any part of you or any aspect of the relationship or any aspect of the home. So yeah, just thank you for being a demonstration of, and also offering, this wisdom for like good fathers and good partners and the families we get to build. Yeah.
Yeah, we're gonna start to wrap it up. We have 2 questions that we always end on. In the spirit of this podcast, not just being a podcast, but actually having the capacity to change men's lives, we always ask our guests for one piece of homework or a prescription, a practice, a tool that men can do themselves after listening to this. It can be anything big or small. What do you got for them?
Mm. Yeah. The There's one that I always include in this advice, and I'm gonna add like another layer to it to go off of what we talked about in our podcast. Is whenever life feels like too much, or she feels like too much, or work feels like too much, or the stress level is at the highest of highs is like go out alone or with your brother in nature, even your backyard, feet in the grass, sun on the skin, lean against a tree, sit under a tree, and just breathe. And allow enough time to where you feel the difference. Because every moment that you continue on in your life in that overwhelmed, contracted state, you're poisoning your life. But every moment after you come back to your center, to your heart, to your roots, you're blessing your life. And so it's worth any amount of time that's required to reset yourself.
Medicine is all around us. It's free.
Mm.
We can do these retreats and these amazing experiences, and if you don't have the means to do those things, anybody can get out in nature and anybody can spend enough time in breath to feel the difference. Our final question, we want to make it abundantly clear where the good men are, where the true leaders are. And so, who is one other man who our audience can look to, or perhaps we can have on the show that will help spread this message and this frequency of mature masculinity?
Mm. Yeah. Fortunate to be surrounded by a lot of them. The two that I'll absolutely mention are my partners in 13 Pines, Alan McGrath and Nick Warner. We're all very different too, so you'll get a very unique perspective from all of us. I think that's why it works. And I would not be in partnership with men that were out of integrity, that weren't walking the walk, and they both do. Some of the other men I would say are men that I've been around and learned from and have been teachers of mine. John Wineland, he's a thread that ties a lot of men's work together.
Chris, thank you so much for being on and sharing from your experience in nature and as a father and a leader. I know the audience is going to get a ton from this.
Thank you so much.
Thank you both for just like the heart forward way that you're holding this podcast. So it was really felt, and I appreciate it. And it brought out the best in me. So thank you guys for holding it.
Honor. And before you go, make sure that you follow the podcast on whatever platform you're listening on and leave us a review and share it with someone in your life who you'd like to rise with.